There are moments in history when science claims it is acting for the greater good, but leaves humanity behind. This is not a story about monsters and horror films. It's about doctors, governments, institutions, and the people who were told they were helping when they were actually being used. Willowbrook, the children no one protected. On Staten Island, New York, stood a facility called the Willowbrook State School. Originally built during World War II, it was later converted into an institution for children with intellectual disabilities. It was supposed to provide care, protection, education. Instead, it became overcrowded and neglected. Designed for roughly 4,000 residents, it eventually held over 6,000. Underfunded, understaffed, filthy. Children lived in conditions described by reporters as inhumane, wandering aimlessly, sitting in their own waste, sometimes restrained for hours. Some caregivers tried to help. Many were simply overwhelmed. But the worst chapter came in the late 1950s. Hepatitis was spreading rapidly through the institution. Nearly every child would eventually contract it. Enter Dr. Saul Krugman, a leading hepatitis researcher. His mission? Understand the virus, develop immunity, advance medicine. His method? Study the children. With parental permission, often obtained through carefully worded letters, children were placed in research wards. Some were given antibodies to test immunity. Others were deliberately infected with hepatitis. In some cases, the infection was administered through injections. In others, through contaminated food mixtures. The research contributed to major breakthroughs. It helped distinguish hepatitis A from hepatitis B. It accelerated vaccine development. But it did so by intentionally exposing vulnerable children to a dangerous disease. Was it progress or exploitation disguised as progress? Public outrage exploded after investigative reporting exposed the conditions inside Willowbrook. The school eventually closed in 1987. The research remains controversial to this day. Canada's hidden nutrition experiments. During the 1940s, as World War II reshaped the globe, Canada was conducting its own quiet crisis. Indigenous communities were suffering from severe malnutrition. Residential schools, already infamous for cultural erasure, were plagued by hunger and underfunding. Researchers saw an opportunity. Instead of immediately correcting the nutritional deficiencies, they studied them. For years, over 1,000 Indigenous children were monitored. Some were given vitamin supplements, others were not. Dental care was withheld in certain cases to preserve experimental conditions. The goal was to measure how nutrient deficiencies affected growth and health. Many children were already underweight. Many were already sick. The experiments produced little meaningful advancement beyond what was already suspected. But the damage, physical and cultural, compounded the trauma of residential schools. The studies remained buried for decades until uncovered by historians in 2013. By then, the researchers were long gone. Bhopal, disaster and aftermath. In 1984, a gas leak in Bhopal, India, released toxic methyl isocyanate into the air. Thousands died within days. Tens of thousands more were left with chronic illness. A hospital was eventually established to treat survivors. It was also designated as a research center. Years later, clinical trials funded by pharmaceutical companies were conducted on patients, many of them survivors of the gas disaster. Reports later suggested inadequate informed consent, poor transparency, and questionable oversight. Some patients died during these trials. Ethics committees were formed, but included many of the same doctors conducting the studies. Regulatory responses were minimal. For people already devastated by industrial negligence, trust in medical institutions fractured even further. Dr. Leo Stanley, Crime, Eugenics, and Control. At San Quentin Prison in the early 20th century, Dr. Leo Stanley believed criminal behavior had biological roots. He subscribed to eugenics, the theory that society could be improved by controlling reproduction. Over nearly 4 decades, he performed hundreds of sterilizations on inmates, some voluntary, many likely coerced. But he didn't stop there. He experimented with gland removals and transplantations, believing hormones might explain aggression and criminality. He even transplanted testicular tissue from executed prisoners and later animals into other inmates in an attempt to restore vitality. His work was eventually dismissed by mainstream medicine. He retired quietly. History did not. The ethical question. All of these cases share a pattern. Vulnerable populations, limited or manipulated consent, institutions with power science claiming necessity. After World War II, the Nuremberg Code attempted to establish ethical boundaries. Later, the Declaration of Helsinki expanded protections. And in 1974, the United States passed the National Research Act, requiring institutional review boards for federally funded research. These safeguards exist because of what happened, because lines were crossed, because progress was pursued without protection. Final thought: medical research is essential. Vaccines, antibiotics, surgical breakthroughs, they save millions of lives. But history reminds us of something uncomfortable. Science without ethics is not progress. It is power. And power, when unchecked, does not ask for permission. It takes it.